Hi, it's Amy. It's Monday night, and this is my summary of my pastor preacher interviews. There's two men that I interviewed. One is Jonathan Hancock, and he is the associate pastor of First Presbyterian Glen Ellen in Chicago. And the second is Mark Bates, who is the senior pastor at Village 7 Presbyterian here in Colorado Springs. Both are pastors of predominantly white, large, biblically literate congregations, suburban congregations. Jonathan, I know well. He is my former boss at Emmaus Ministries, and I know I've mentioned it before. Emmaus, we reached out to male street prostitutes. He was on the board. He was a pastor at LaSalle Church for years, which is an urban Chicago church, and he was on the board of Emmaus, and then when Emmaus transitioned to a new executive director, he took over, and that was during my time there. But Jonathan has worked in urban ministry for 30 years as a pastor, and this is his first time working in a suburban ministry, and he still lives on the south side of Chicago. So he commutes up to Glen Ellen, which is a suburb of Chicago. He commutes, 5 times a week up there, and it's been a real challenge for him because, he's used to an urban setting. He always says there's like these angels sitting on his shoulder, talking in his ear, things that he should say in his sermons or say in his prayers about the poor, about the disenfranchised, about race. And I mean, that's what his heart has been for so long. But yet he's preaching to a church that is in a different context. So his challenge is, how can I talk to these people without beating them over the head? Because he says sometimes he does feel like he's beating them over the head, which is not true. I'm sure they all love him. But, so he always tries to work it in someplace. He says that his congregation, they are active in ministry. They do a lot of mission trips, and they come back, but they come back to their safe haven. And so his job as a preacher, he feels that his job is to bridge the gap between going out and doing ministry, whether it's in Uganda or whether it's even in Glen Ellen, like how to bridge that gap of living your life as ministry versus just doing ministry. And so he feels that burden in his preaching. He's a manuscript guy through and through. He says he gets too anxious. He feels that God has really given him this honor to preach, and that he is spending 5 or 6 hours preparing, and that he wants to give the congregation everything that God has given him. So he relies heavily on notes. He said, even if it's written on my brain and heart, he said, I just get lost without using the manuscript. So Jonathan's big thing is he only will work on a sermon 5 to 6 hours. He says that he always defers to conversation with people and time with people. So as the congregational care pastor, if he's got a sermon at the end of the week, the people who come before him, who are in pain or in need, come first. He said otherwise it's a missed opportunity. And I feel like if I end up anywhere near preaching, like working for a church where I have to preach every once in a while, that'll probably, and that's why I chose Jonathan, because that would probably be my jam as well, where of keeping things in balance. He does all of the exegetical work and relies on commentaries. His favorite is N.T. Wright. So that's Jonathan, kind of in a nutshell. And then there's Mark. Mark is a senior pastor here in, like I said, at Village 7, and it's a very conservative church. So, in fact, the tell you, I was a little nervous he wasn't going to do the interview with me because it's a preaching class and it's the woman thing and, you know, John Piper and all that. But that's beside the point. He was very, very awesome and nice. So anyway, his teaching is expository. He plans it out over a whole year. Or I should say, the Lord gives him what he wants him to preach for that year, even the books and down to the main ideas. And so he's not starting from scratch each week. He begins on Monday. He probably spends 2 hours on Monday he does New Testament. He does the translation work for the New Testament. The Old Testament, he says he's not great on Hebrew, so he does some study on that, on the structure of the passage and the context. He relies a lot on commentary for that. He's a big fan of John Stott. He has a biblically literate congregation. So he said the people that come to Village 7, he feels that he speaks to them naturally. You know, that it is a very homogeneous crowd there. But he tries not to speak in tribal language, to keep in mind that he wants people to feel comfortable bringing those who are unchurched or not believers, to just bringing them in and having them feel comfortable as well. One of the things that he gets concerned about is the whole political scene, and that and this is a concern. I mean, you know, it's ministry land here sometimes, and he has people from Focus on the Family and Compassion, and, you know, his church is filled with folks from Parachurch Ministries, and it's an active church ministry-wise too. Do a lot of great work in the community. But he says he sees it sometimes as a conservative Christian echo chamber, and he has to kind of remind people not to watch too much Fox and to be able to listen to NPR and just see other people's perspectives, because he doesn't want politics overshadowing the gospel witness. He wants people to see the beauty of Christ, the beauty of the gospel, in a way that they can grasp apart from kind of the politically charged conversation. I'm a writer, so he spoke how he listens to communicators all the time, like, even if it's people he doesn't agree with, but they've got great rhetorical skills. You listen to them. As a writer, I read what other writers, you know, the more you read, the better of a writer you are. The more you listen to people who are great communicators, I imagine the better the preacher you are. But he said that, you know, in terms of honoring the gospel, like, it's like having people over for dinner. You can't just throw a can of soup in a pot. You know, that you have to take the time to prepare, you have to dig into the text, that you can get everything right in a sermon, but if you're not honoring the text, and you're not digging into the Bible, then you really do fail at everything else. Both these men, there was just a sense of reverence on the time that God has given them to preach. Like, it's a real honor to be in this place. Mark spends 12 hours on a sermon. Jonathan spends 6, but there's still, for both of them, there's a lot of emotional investment, a lot of spiritual investment. They both go in speaking from what the Lord wants them to say, like what the Lord has put on their heart, but there is still this bit of agenda there that both of them share. And that's hard, because I think for me, I'm a big agenda girl. I mean, I came from an agenda, whole career of agendas. So I think in the last 2 sermons that I've preached, I've really started with an agenda first. And I know we were told not to do that, but I think that I have done that to a degree. And just from these two guys, the readings and everything, the lectures, whatever, but just this past week, I've really been hit by just the whole process of preparing for a sermon and the importance of really marinating in the Word. So that's it. Thanks.